Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine you've met someone amazing. The connection is electric, you're laughing, things just click. But then you start talking, really talking, and you realize your fundamental experiences of the world are miles apart.
Yeah.
Maybe you grew up on opposite sides of the globe, spoke different languages since birth, or hold family values that seem to clash at every turn. What happens when these differences go beyond personality quirks and into the deep roots of culture within a relationship?
It's a dynamic that's becoming incredibly common, actually. As our world shrinks and people connect more than ever before, individuals from vastly different cultural backgrounds are meeting, falling in love.
Building lives together.
Exactly. Intercultural marriages are definitely on the rise.
And that's exactly what we're diving deep into today. The unique journey of cross-cultural relationships. What are the big challenges, the surprising benefits, and what does it really take to make them work?
To get a handle on this, we've pulled from a fascinating mix of sources. We're looking at insights from academic research studies exploring family resilience in these cross-cultural marriages
Right.
and really unpacking the specific frustrations these couples report.
But we're also grounding this in the messy, beautiful reality of people's lives. We've pulled from online forums where individuals have shared their raw personal experiences
Stories.
of navigating dating and marriage across significant cultural and language divides.
So our mission for this deep dive is to distill from these sources what the most significant hurdles actually are, how couples successfully build resilience in the face of them, and to really zoom in on the critical role communication, especially language, plays in harmonizing two different worlds.
Okay, so first off, what exactly do we mean by a cross-cultural relationship in this context? Is it just different countries?
The sources define it pretty broadly, actually. It's bringing together individuals from different cultural backgrounds. Now, this can be big things like race, ethnicity, or nationality, but it can also include less obvious differences like family habits, core mindsets, even specific regional customs within the same country sometimes.
Interesting.
An international couple, different countries, distinct languages. That's a classic example, but it's definitely not the only one.
And as you said, this isn't some rare thing anymore.
Not at all. The data shows intercultural marriages are increasingly common.
Right.
Absolutely. And while every single relationship is unique, bringing two cultural backgrounds together, as one source puts it, adds the significant inherent layer of difference and complexity right from day one.
So marriage itself becomes, what, an exercise in blending?
Kind of. One source described it as this incredible ongoing effort to blend and harmonize these distinct cultural worlds.
Now, look, relationships are hard work, period. Every marriage has its challenges.
True.
But the research consistently points out that intercultural unions face additional hurdles that are specifically tied to these cultural differences. What were the biggest ones the sources highlighted?
Okay, one that came up over and over is the clash of cultural expectations and traditions.
Right. What does that actually look like?
Well, it hits on really fundamental stuff.
Ah.
How you view the purpose of marriage itself. Is it primarily about romantic love between two individuals, like often seen in the West? Versus maybe a more non-Western view of it being about joining families, collective responsibility, also the role religion plays in daily life, incredibly sensitive areas like how you raise children.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Huge, tied right into your own upbringing. Then there's differing values, food, even something like expected gender roles in the home.
These aren't surface-level disagreements about what movie to watch then.
Definitely not. These are often deeply ingrained beliefs tied to how you were raised, and if they clash, they can really, really rock the foundation of a relationship.
Wow.
They absolutely can. And perhaps the most challenging area identified, the one causing significant strain, is issues involving family, particularly in-laws.
Ah, the in-law challenge. A classic source of stress in any marriage, but you're saying it's amplified here.
Significantly amplified, according to the research. Intercultural couples consistently reported more problems with extended family compared to couples from the same background.
More problems like what, specifically?
We're talking about in-laws being overly involved, or sometimes outright disapproving of the partner or their culture.
Oof.
Or just a general lack of family support for the union.
And the sources didn't pull punches on the consequences of this either, did they?
No, they didn't. It's linked to psychological stress for the couple, major strain around holidays and traditions, and sadly, even a higher risk of divorce.
Oh, really? Divorce?
Yeah. One study specifically found that problems with in-laws severely harm marital satisfaction. It can put one spouse in an awful position, feeling they have to choose between their partner and their family.
That sounds impossible.
Or feeling their partner prioritizes their birth family's expectations over the relationship. This can sometimes hit on deep cultural norms like filial piety,
Which is...
that profound respect and obligation owed to elders in many cultures. That can be a huge point of conflict if it clashes with the expectations of a more individualistic culture where the couple unit is seen as primary.
Wow. Okay. That sounds incredibly tough to navigate. What about finances? That's another common battleground.
Finances are definitely on the list of major challenges, yeah. And cultural background adds another layer here, too.
Oh, so?
Different views on everything from how you manage money day to day, who is expected to be the primary provider, how savings are handled, how decisions about spending are made.
So it's not just about money, but the whole philosophy around it.
Exactly. These can all stem from cultural norms and become significant sources of friction if they aren't openly discussed and negotiated.
Which brings us to communication. Vital in any relationship, but it takes on a whole new dimension when cultures intersect, right?
It really does. Beyond the universal difficulties, just learning to communicate well with anyone.
Sure.
Intercultural couples face specific hurdles tied to differing communication styles and, of course, language barriers.
Okay, let's talk about the language barrier. That feels like a really fundamental one. It's our main tool for connecting, right?
Exactly. Language is the primary way we share meaning, and the experiences shared in those online forums vividly illustrate this struggle.
What kind of things did people say?
People described the early days of dating across a language gap as incredibly challenging, lots of awkward misunderstandings, needing immense patience.
That way.
And that frustrating feeling that you just can't express your full self or have those really deep, nuanced conversations early on. It takes so much effort.
Yeah, I read one anecdote about trying to explain something deeply important and the language barrier twisting it into something unintentionally hurtful.
Right, or the emotional toll, feeling isolated or left out when you're with your partner's family or friends and everyone just switches to their native language.
Oh, that feeling of being on the outside looking in.
Yes, exactly. Or relying on your partner to constantly translate, which can be exhausting for both people. It definitely impacts the ability to fully relax and connect in those moments.
Interestingly, though, there seemed to be a bit of a debate in the forums about just how essential it is to master each other's language.
Right. That was fascinating. Some people felt strongly that really learning their partner's language was non-negotiable for a deep connection and true understanding, You can't truly know them otherwise.
But others?
Others felt it wasn't strictly necessary if they could communicate effectively in a common third language, like English, for instance.
Okay.
Or if they weren't planning on raising children who would need the language. The importance really seemed to depend on the couple's specific situation and priorities.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Several people mentioned an unexpected benefit of communicating in a language they weren't fully fluent in.
Ah, yes. That was surprising. They found that using a less fluent language forced them to be more direct, more straightforward.
How so?
They couldn't hide behind complex vocabulary or sarcasm or those subtle cultural nuances that can sometimes obscure meaning.
One person said something like they were sometimes uncomfortable being so straightforward about my deeper self in their native language. But in their second language, they could only express things very literally. It sounds like the barrier actually stripped away some defenses.
And led to a surprising kind of raw honesty.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating twist. A limitation becoming a path to greater authenticity.
It really is. And you see a lot of shared laughter in those forum posts, too, about language mishaps and misunderstandings. Humor seems like a key survival tool.
It absolutely feels like it would have to be. So given all these significant challenges, the cultural clashes, the tricky family dynamics, the finances, the language barriers, how do couples build relationships that don't just limp along but actually thrive? The academic sources talked about family resilience.
Yes, family resilience.
Yeah.
It's this idea that a family isn't just passively hit by crises. They have the capacity to survive, adapt, struggle through, and potentially come out stronger. So it's not just about being tough.
No, and importantly, the sources view this as something you can build and develop. It's not just an inherent trait you're born with. It's a process.
Okay, and they broke down this resilience into 3 core areas. Let's translate these from research speak into something a bit more practical.
Absolutely. So first, at the heart of it is the belief system. Think of this as the couple's shared mindset and core values.
Okay.
For cross-cultural couples, the key resilience strategy here is actively working to see conflicts or differences, not just as problems, but as opportunities.
Opportunities for what?
For growth, for understanding. It's about finding meaning and value in the challenges they face together, which helps them stay united and strengthens their bond through the struggle.
So it's like flipping the script from this difference is tearing us apart to this difference is something we're navigating as a team.
Exactly that. The second area is organizational processes. If you imagine the family as a small, dynamic team, this is about how you manage yourselves, your rules, how you function day to day. Resilient families are flexible.
Adaptable.
Yes, adaptable. They can adjust their routines, tap into their combined strengths and resources, whether that's emotional support, practical skills, or even financial stability to bounce back and reorganize when difficulties arise.
So it's about being practical and figuring out ways to make things work, even when your usual ways of doing things clash.
Precisely. And the third area is communication processes. This one is absolutely vital for survival, as you can imagine.
How does it differ from just, talking?
It requires a high degree of tolerance and mutual understanding. It's about actively trying to set aside ego, creating a safe and comfortable space where you can both truly speak and listen.
Really listen.
Yes. And finding that shared rhythm or frequency in your communication pattern that allows for harmony even when discussing difficult topics.
Okay, those are the sort of core pillars of resilience. What were some of the more specific, practical strategies the sources identified for tackling those challenges we discussed earlier?
Well, for many challenges, like those cultural clashes or disagreements over finances, the most common and effective strategy cited was pretty straightforward. Being open-minded and willing to communicate.
Just talking it out.
Talking it out, but also listening. Openly discussing expectations, airing difficulties, and taking the time to genuinely understand each other's cultural perspective were key.
Makes sense.
And the research even suggested that couples who actively work through these differences often feel closer and more satisfied because of the effort they put in. The struggle strengthened them.
Except frustratingly, for the in-law challenges you mentioned earlier. So just talking didn't cut it there.
Right. That in-law challenge stood out as particularly resistant to just open communication. While some couples tried direct strategies, the sources mention other tactics.
Like what?
Things like simply avoiding interactions sometimes, or using strategic preparation for visits, like having planned excuses to leave early or deliberately diverting conversations away from sensitive topics.
Oh, that sounds stressful.
It is. And even with these tactics, this challenge consistently dragged down marital satisfaction in the research. It really reinforces how deeply ingrained those cultural expectations around family, like that filial piety concept, can be.
That highlights the complexity when it's not just about the couple, but the wider family system.
Yeah.
Okay, what about managing those language barriers we talked about? Any practical tips there?
Oh yeah, the sources, especially the forum discussions, had tons of practical advice here. Setting realistic, achievable goals for language learning is crucial. Don't expect fluency overnight.
Right, small steps.
Exactly. Immerse yourselves in the language. Daily practice, watching movies or TV shows in that language, listening to music, trying cultural exchange if possible.
And technology must be a huge help today.
Absolutely. Translation apps for quick fixes, dedicated language learning apps for structure, finding online language exchange partners.
Lots of tools.
Definitely. Creating a supportive environment is also key. Practice together, encourage each other, and crucially, be patient and embrace mistakes.
Laugh about them, maybe.
Yes. Everyone learning a language sounds silly sometimes. Using simple language initially, practicing active listening, paying attention to nonverbal cues, and trying to integrate the language into daily activities, even small ones, all make a difference.
It definitely sounds like a commitment, requiring patience and effort from both people, more than maybe in a monocultural relationship.
Absolutely. But despite all these potential hurdles and the work involved, the sources also emphasize the powerful, sometimes unexpected benefits of these relationships.
The upside. It's not just about surviving the challenges.
No, it's about what you gain.
What do they find?
The research suggests that because couples do work through these significant issues together, they can forge an incredibly strong bond and a unique shared identity.
The shared struggle creates closeness.
Exactly. The challenges themselves become catalysts for growth and, as we heard from the forums, often a source of shared humor and resilience.
And the relationship naturally becomes this incredible platform for cultural exchange and personal expansion, right?
Totally. You're constantly learning about different foods, music, traditions, ways of seeing the world just by being together.
That sounds amazing.
This immersion naturally builds enhanced empathy and patience. And for the partner learning a new language, having a native-speaking practice partner who's also your significant other, well, that's a massive advantage.
And it must deepen the emotional connection, too, learning their language.
It really can. Finally, the sources pointed out the value of external support.
Like therapy.
Therapy, yes, or seeking family guidance or professional counseling services. These can be incredibly helpful for couples to proactively plan, solve problems, and consciously build that family resilience we discussed.
Getting some tool.
Exactly. Practical resources on intercultural communication competence, basically, the skills needed to navigate communication effectively and appropriately across cultural differences are also valuable.
So, things you can learn.
Yes. Talking openly about expectations, maybe with a therapist or counselor providing some structure, can help address sensitive topics early on before they become huge problems.
These aren't just academic concepts, then. They're actionable tools couples can pick up and use to navigate these complex waters.
Definitely. So let's pull back and summarize what this deep dive has shown us. Cross-cultural relationships, they bring unique, significant hurdles, clashes, and deep expectations, complex family dynamics, especially those in-laws,
Right.
financial differences, and the ever-present challenge of communication and language barriers.
But crucially, the sources also reveal the inherent strengths and the deliberate strategies couples employ to build resilience.
It's about cultivating a shared mindset that finds meaning in difficulty, being flexible and adaptable as a unit, and committing to tolerant, open communication.
Openness, a genuine willingness to learn, patience, and leveraging resources like technology, these seem like key ingredients.
That's right. So you've got to look inside the specific dynamics at play in these unions and the practical ways couples not only navigate these challenges, but often transform them into opportunities for deeper connection, personal growth, and a stronger bond.
And here's where it gets really interesting, something to leave you with. If the intentional effort required to navigate these cultural and linguistic differences, leading to an enhanced empathy, immense patience, a stronger bond, and even forcing that more direct, honest communication style, is so powerful.
Yeah.
What might couples from the same cultural background learn from adopting some of these deliberate strategies? What aspects of building resilience, cultivating openness, or practicing radically clear communication could benefit any relationship, regardless of where the partners come from?